Gary Evans grew up in a horrible situation, as his father frequently abused him and his siblings. At the age of 8, he became interested in expensive things, so in turn, he started stealing and pawning those items off. This habit continued all the way through his early 20s, as a combination of the deaths of both of his parents and his mental health issues led to him going on a spree of robbery and murder, as most of his victims were his close friends whom he had committed these crimes with. He was extremely paranoid, feeling like someone was always out to get him. So when these men gave him the slightest suspicion, he shot and dismembered them. When he was finally caught, he used a secret key to break out of his cuffs and escape from the police van. And Gary made sure he wouldn't face justice for his crimes. Welcome to History's Biggest Villains. Gary Edwards was born on October 7, 1954 in Troy, New York, to Roy and Flora May. Gary and his sister Robbie grew up in an unstable home with physical abuse from their father aimed at both the children and their mother. In addition to this torment, the two children had to watch their mom attempt suicide on multiple occasions. Evans later claimed that he was raped by his father when he was 8. Also around this time, Gary began to show interest in works of art and pricey items, as he was later caught stealing jewelry worth $1,000. During his school years, he repeatedly stole small items such as books and comics, in addition to occasionally shoplifting. After his parents divorced in 1968, Gary and his mother moved to Cohoes, where he went to the local high school. In the summer of 1970, he was arrested for breaking and entering, being sent to a juvenile detention center for 3 months. While he was locked up, his mother married and divorced 4 husbands due to her alcohol abuse. In 1971, she came out as a lesbian. After his release, the two frequently argued, so Gary left the house, dropped out of school, and began living as a vagrant. In the mid-1970s, he returned to Troy and rented an apartment with his childhood friends Michael Falco and Timothy or Tim Reisdorf. On January 13, 1977, Gary was arrested for trespassing and stealing property at Lake Placid, being given a 4-year sentence in the Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora. While he was in prison, his father died of throat cancer. In 1979, he was transferred to the Great Meadow Correctional Facility in Comstock, being released on parole on March 21, 1980. After he returned to his apartment in Troy, he, Tim, and Michael began committing robberies and thefts, using the apartment as a storage space for stolen goods they would later sell. In June 1980, Gary was arrested for theft and sent to the old Rensselaer County Jail, but with the help of several Hells Angels, he escaped. According to his lawyer Jim Horton, he said, "I bet you can't throw me over that fence." They literally threw him on top of it, and he climbed up on the barbed wire and escaped. He was recaptured just 5 hours later, and on September 21st, he was returned to the Clinton Correctional Facility to serve out his full sentence, having to be put in protective custody after ratting on some of the Angels. In 1982, Gary was transferred to the Attica Correctional Facility after a prison fight, where he remained until his release on December 29th. At the start of the new year, Gary and Michael committed several petty thefts after they moved to Florida. A month later, Gary's mother died, forcing the duo to come back to New York and resume their criminal activities together with Tim in tow. On May 10, 1983, Gary was arrested again for burglary and trespassing in Saratoga County, briefly being housed in the county jail. Throughout the rest of the year, he was transferred to various prisons, but was never brought to trial and eventually released in March 1984. In January 1985, Tim cut all contact with Gary, as it was just Gary and Michael now on the crime spree. On February 16, 1985, the two men robbed an antique collector's apartment in East Greenbush, making out with $15,000 worth of items. On April, Gary stole the car of 2 drug traffickers and sold it for $12,000, but the victims identified him, resulting in his arrest in Cohoes. He accepted a plea deal in exchange for his sentence being commuted, admitting his guilt in the robbery and illegal gun possession. He was released on probation, promising to stop stealing and find the real job, but by July of that year, he was bored with robbery and decided to take something more permanent. Near the end of July, Gary built a makeshift silencer for his pistol, using it to kill Michael at their apartment in Troy, then dismembering his body with a chainsaw. He then called Tim to help him get rid of the body, as even though he apparently cut off all contact with Gary, Tim agreed to help him. The men stuffed the body in a sleeping bag and drove it to Gary's sister's home in Lake Worth Corridor, Florida, burying it in the backyard. The motive for the murder was apparently revenge, as Tim told Gary that Michael had been profiting off their ill-gotten gains by selling it for himself. But in actuality, Tim was blaming Michael for what he himself was doing. The duo stayed in Lake Worth Corridor for about 6 weeks before returning to New York, where Gary was arrested again for violating his parole and sentenced to 4 years at Sing Sing. While in this prison, Gary became friends with the son of Sam, David Berkowitz, over their mutual interest in bodybuilding. In December 1987, Gary got into a fight with another inmate who was a child molester, for which he was sentenced to solitary confinement for several months. On March 1st, 1988, Gary was released, and shortly afterwards, he became friends with 27-year-old thief Damian Cuomo. And of course, two thieves getting together meant that crimes were committed. Between March 1988 and September 1989, the two men put up several thefts and robberies, getting better at it after each clean getaway. The men were pulled over and arrested in March 1989 after police found ski masks, stun guns, radio scanners, and ropes in the back of their car. But due to lack of sufficient evidence, both men were released. On September 8, 1989, while robbing a store in Watertown, Gary shot and killed 63-year-old shop owner Douglas Berry before he and Cuomo stole $15,000 worth of merchandise. The pair left no substantial evidence behind, and the investigators were left without any leads. On December 29th, Damon had begun to go through some major depressive episodes, and Gary felt like he might snitch on him, so he was shot and killed. In early 1990, he moved back to Florida, where he stayed for several weeks before moving on to California, coming across a female acquaintance he had known for 15 years. Not long after, he was arrested for threatening the woman and her husband after she refused to have sex with him. Gary accepted the proposal of leaving the state in exchange for no charges being brought against him, so he returned to New York. On October 17, 1991, Gary killed 36-year-old shop owner Gregory Jubin before stealing several items, selling them for $60,000 in total. He then buried the murder weapon at the Albany Road Cemetery in Menands. While there, he dismantled an 1,100-pound marble tombstone, which he also sold. After this most recent murder, Gary decided to quit his criminal career and get a job. Over the next several years, he worked as a day laborer, only committing petty thefts on occasion. In January 1994, he was finally arrested for looting and vandalism for stealing and selling the tombstone, being sentenced to a month at the Albany County Jail. After his release, he moved to Vermont, living a survivalist lifestyle in a tent. In early 1993, he stole cufflinks for $1,500 from a group shop in Quechee, later breaking into the Norman Williams Library in Woodstock and stealing a valuable book titled The Birds of America. Over the next few months, he tried to find a buyer, but with the help of informants, police tracked him down in June 1994 and arrested him. Gary was threatened with a life sentence, but since he revealed where he kept the book and returned it intact, he was only given 2 years. He was paroled on June 6, 1996, and returned to New York, where he renewed his partnership with Tim. They then rented a storage room in Cologne, where they would keep their tools and stolen goods. However, knowing that he had helped him dispose of Michael's body back in 1985, Gary was paranoid that Tim would tell on him. So on October 3, 1997, Gary shot and killed his friend. He dismembered the corpse and buried the remains in a wooded area, also disposing of the murder weapon. Shortly afterwards, he fled back to New York, again violating his parole, as afterwards he was listed as a wanted fugitive. On May 27, 1998, Gary surrendered himself at the police station in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, confessing that he had killed multiple people. At the subsequent interrogation, he claimed that he was prompted to give himself up out of guilt, as he had watched Tim's 9-year-old son become aggressive and withdrawn since his father's disappearance. On June 24th, he described in detail each of the killings and revealed the burial sites of both Michael and Tim. On August 12, 1998, Gary was arraigned at the Rensselaer County District Court and charged with 3 of the murders. He was then transferred to the Albany County Jail, where he was charged with parole violations before the local court. 2 days later, while en route to Troy and passing through the Menands Bridge, Gary, despite being in manacles and chains, used a secret key hidden in his nose to free himself. He had apparently used a shank to bore a hole in his sinuses so he could fit a key up there. Once he was free, he then broke the window of the transport van and jumped out of the moving vehicle. He was quickly cornered by police, but managed to run to the fence and leap into the Hudson River. But he miscalculated and he hit the rocks at the edge, causing fatal head injuries. Due to the circumstances, his death was ruled a suicide. According to Jim Horton, his lawyer, Gary had planned to kill himself long before the incident, having sent him suicide notes expressing remorse and inability to deal with isolation, with the chilling final message, "I win." Thank you guys. I really appreciate y'all for the support. Leave a like, hit that subscribe button, turn my post notifications on if you haven't already. Thank you. Please be safe. I'm out. Peace.
By the end of his life, serial killer Gary Evans' rap sheet was more than 11 feet long, packed with every imaginable felony from burglary to arson to murder. In 1998, the last desperate act of this notorious serial killer became the talk of the Capital Region for years to come. In tonight's CBS 6 Rewind, the bold final moments and evil deeds of this vicious criminal whose laser focus in life was committing crimes and evading punishment. A hidden key and a broken car window.
All of a sudden, this guy dives out of the side window.
And a long jump from a local bridge.
He's got an orange jumpsuit on.
And the legend of Gary Evans, escape artist and serial killer,
And he was just hanging there as the van was skidding.
was sealed forever.
Made no qualms about it. Jumped off. Head first, dove right over.
Evans always found it easier to walk a crooked line than a straight one. He was 43 years old when he died, pulling off his final escape. According to some, a fitting end for a sociopathic killer.
He was flatlined when we got to it.
Was he breathing? Was he alive?
No, he wasn't breathing. He was on the shore when we got there.
Others, like the retired state police senior investigator who plotted his movements for 13 years, say it was planned.
This was an escape to commit suicide. I had seen him the previous Wednesday, and he wrote me a letter, and it showed him. He was a pretty good artist, and he showed himself flying through the air with shards of glass.
Horton says Evans was as methodical in his death as he was in his life of crime. He had dug away at his sinuses so that he could eventually insert a handcuff key up his nose. X-rays after his death show it was still lodged there.
This guy could crawl through a straw to escape if he wanted to.